Most dangerous prison gangs. How they control the inside world. There are places where the rules of society no longer apply, where power is not given by law, but taken by force. Inside these walls, survival isn't guaranteed. It's negotiated. And the ones who control that negotiation aren't always the guards. They are organized. They are patient. And they are everywhere. Prison gangs don't just exist inside cells. They control entire systems, entire economies, entire lives. And what happens behind these walls is far more structured and far more dangerous than most people realize. The moment someone enters a high-security prison, they step into a completely different world. A world with its own rules, its own hierarchy, its own consequences. There is no orientation guide, no handbook explaining how to survive. Instead, new arrivals are watched, assessed, and silently categorized. B-roll. Inside a crowded cell block, inmates sit on bunks, watching a newcomer walk in. The atmosphere is tense, quiet. Every movement matters. Where you sit,
who you talk to,
even how long you make eye contact. Because inside prison, respect is currency. And disrespect, real or imagined, can cost you everything. Many inmates quickly learn that staying neutral is nearly impossible. Sooner or later, a choice has to be made. And that choice often leads to one thing: alignment. Prison gangs didn't appear overnight. They evolved out of necessity, survival, and power struggles. In the early days, inmates formed alliances based on race, geography, or shared backgrounds.
Protection was the first reason.
But power quickly became the second. B-roll. Groups of inmates standing together in a yard, separated into clusters. Guards watch from towers. Over time, these groups became more organized. Leadership structures formed. Rules were written. Codes were enforced. What began as protection turned into something much larger. A system of control. And eventually a system of influence that extended far beyond prison walls. But how do these gangs actually operate? Who gives the orders? And what happens when someone breaks the rules? What comes next is where things get darker. Prison gangs are not chaotic. They are structured, often more organized than people on the outside would expect. At the top are the shot callers. These are the leaders, the decision makers. They rarely act directly. Instead, they give orders that are followed without question. B-roll. Close-up of an inmate whispering to another through cell bars. Subtle, quiet communication. Below them are lieutenants, enforcers, and foot soldiers. Each role is clear. Each responsibility understood. Communication is often coded through letters, gestures, or indirect messages. Even something as simple as a handshake can carry meaning. And discipline? It's absolute. B-roll. Empty prison corridor. Echoing footsteps. A sense of isolation. If someone disrespects the gang, if they refuse an order, or worse, cooperate with authorities, there are consequences. And those consequences are designed to send a message, not just to the individual, but to everyone watching. Inside prison, money still exists, but it doesn't always look like cash. It looks like food, phone time, protection. Everything has value, and prison gangs control that value. B-roll. Hidden stash inside a cell, small packages, contraband items carefully concealed. Contraband flows through these systems. Items that shouldn't exist inside prison somehow do. And they don't move randomly. They move through networks controlled by gangs. B-roll. A guard walking past cells while inmates quietly pass items through small gaps. Debts are tracked. Transactions are remembered. And nothing is forgotten. If someone owes, they pay. One way or another. But what happens when someone can't? Or won't? That's where the real danger begins. Survival inside prison isn't about strength alone. It's about awareness. Understanding the environment. Reading people. Knowing when to speak and when to stay silent. There are unspoken rules. Don't ask too many questions. Don't interfere in business that isn't yours. And never show weakness. B-roll. Tense moment in a prison yard. Two inmates arguing while others watch closely. because weakness attracts attention, and attention can be dangerous. Many inmates adapt quickly. Others don't. And those who fail to understand the system often learn the hard way. But even for those who follow the rules, there's no guarantee of safety, because in this world, control is constantly shifting, and what happens next can change everything overnight. Violence inside prison isn't always random. Often it's strategic. Every act sends a message, a warning, a reminder, or a demonstration of power. When a gang needs to enforce its authority, it does so in a way that cannot be ignored. And the message spreads quickly, through whispers, through silence, through fear. Because fear is one of the most effective tools of control. But here's the question. If these gangs are operating so openly, why can't they be stopped? The answer isn't simple, and it goes deeper than most people think. What happens inside prison doesn't always stay there. Many prison gangs maintain connections on the outside. Orders are passed. Operations continue, even from behind bars. B-roll, close-up of a letter being sealed. A phone receiver slowly placed down. Communication finds a way, and influence extends beyond confinement, which means the power these gangs hold is not limited to cells and corridors. It reaches further. And that raises a difficult question. Where does the control truly end? Joining a prison gang is one thing. Leaving is another. Because once someone becomes part of that system, it's not easy to walk away. Loyalty is expected. And breaking that loyalty comes with consequences. B-roll, a solitary confinement cell. Bare walls. A single bed. Some try to separate. Some request isolation. Some attempt to start over. But the past doesn't always stay in the past. And inside prison, history has a long memory. Behind these walls, control is not always visible. It doesn't wear a uniform. It doesn't stand in watchtowers. Sometimes it moves quietly, through whispers, through systems, through fear. Prison gangs don't just survive inside this environment. They shape it. And for many, understanding that reality comes too late. Because once you step into this world, you're no longer just serving time. You're navigating a system that was never designed to let you feel safe. And the most unsettling part? Even when the doors close, the influence of that system doesn't always stay locked inside. Inside prison, identity is not just personal, it's strategic. Who you are, where you're from, what you believe, even how you look, can determine where you stand before you ever say a word. New arrivals quickly notice something unsettling. People don't just gather randomly. They separate. By race, by region, by affiliation. And once those lines are drawn, crossing them isn't simple. Tattoos often tell stories that words don't. Symbols of loyalty, marks of past actions, proof of commitment. To someone unfamiliar, they may look like random ink, but inside they are signals. And everyone understands what they mean. The question is, what happens when someone doesn't belong anywhere? Or worse, when they refuse to choose? That's where pressure begins to build. Recruitment doesn't always look like recruitment. There are no formal invitations, no open conversations. Instead, it begins subtly. A greeting, a favor, a test. Someone might offer protection or access to something valuable. And in return, they expect something back. For some, joining a gang feels like the only option. Safety in numbers. A sense of belonging in a place designed to isolate. But what isn't always clear is the cost. Because once someone accepts that protection, they also accept the rules. And those rules are not optional. Initiation varies. Sometimes it's a test of loyalty. Sometimes it's a task that must be completed. And sometimes it's simply about proving you're willing to follow orders, no matter what those orders are. After that moment, there's no going back. And what comes next is a life defined by obligation. Every day inside prison follows a routine. Wake up, count, meals, movement. But beneath that routine, there's another system operating. One that isn't written on any official schedule. Gangs influence where people sit, who they interact with, even how they move through shared spaces. Nothing is completely random. Every action is observed, and every decision can have consequences. Meals aren't just about food. They're moments where alliances are visible, where boundaries are reinforced, where respect or disrespect can be displayed without a single word. For someone on the outside, it might look ordinary, but inside, every detail matters. And one small mistake can shift everything. Rules inside prison gangs are strict, and they are enforced without hesitation. If someone breaks those rules, the response is immediate. Punishment isn't always loud. Sometimes it's quiet. A confrontation behind closed doors. A sudden change in behavior from others. Isolation that wasn't there before. But the message is always clear. Follow the rules or face the consequences. Punishment isn't always loud. Sometimes it's quiet. A confrontation behind closed doors. A sudden change in behavior from others. Isolation that wasn't there before. But the message is always clear. Follow the rules or face the consequences. In some cases, punishment is meant to correct. In others, it's meant to make an example. Because maintaining control requires consistency. And inconsistency creates weakness. That's something these groups cannot afford. But what happens when different gangs collide? When two systems of control clash in the same space? That's when tension turns into something much more dangerous. Prison is not controlled by a single group. There are multiple gangs, multiple hierarchies, multiple agendas. And they don't always align. Territory matters. Respect matters. Reputation matters even more. A small disagreement can escalate quickly. A misunderstanding can become a conflict. And once that conflict begins, it rarely stays contained. When tensions rise, the entire prison feels it. Movement is restricted. Schedules change. The atmosphere shifts. Because everyone knows something is about to happen. And when it does, it affects everyone inside those walls. But here's the deeper question. If gangs bring danger, why do they continue to grow? The answer lies in something many people overlook.
Need.
For many inmates, prison gangs are not just about power. They're about survival, structure, identity. In an environment where everything feels uncertain, these groups offer something predictable. Rules, order, protection. To someone on the outside, it may seem obvious. Just stay away. But inside, it's not that simple. Because isolation can be just as dangerous as involvement. And navigating that balance is one of the hardest challenges an inmate faces. Some manage it, others don't. And those who don't often become part of the system they once tried to avoid. Living under constant pressure changes people. The need to stay alert. The need to read situations quickly. The need to avoid mistakes. It doesn't switch off. Sleep becomes lighter. Trust becomes rare. And over time, the mind adapts to survive. But that adaptation comes at a cost. Because even after someone leaves prison, those habits don't always disappear. The system stays with them. Long after the walls are gone. Prison gangs are often seen as shadows. Hidden forces operating behind locked doors. But the truth is, they are part of a much larger system. One shaped by environment, by necessity, by survival. Inside prison, control isn't always held by those in authority. Sometimes it's built quietly, through structure, through influence, through fear. And once that system takes hold, it becomes part of everyday life. For those inside, it's not a choice to understand it. It's a requirement. Because misunderstanding it can come at a cost few are willing to risk. Not all prison gangs are the same. Some are small, temporary, limited to a single facility. But others are deeply rooted, highly organized, and feared across entire systems. Groups like the Aryan Brotherhood, the Mexican Mafia, the Black Guerrilla Family, and others didn't just form for protection. They became institutions. These groups developed reputations that travel faster than any individual. A name alone can carry weight. It can open doors or close them instantly. Because inside prison, reputation isn't just history. It's influence. And influence can control entire populations. What makes these gangs different is their ability to maintain structure over time. Leadership doesn't disappear when someone is locked away. It evolves. Orders are passed down. Roles are reassigned. And the system continues, even when key members are isolated. But how do they maintain that level of control in an environment designed to restrict it? That's where communication becomes critical. Communication inside prison is rarely straightforward. It doesn't need to be, because those who understand don't need things spelled out. Messages can travel in unexpected ways. Through letters, through conversations that sound ordinary, through signals that most people would overlook. Even silence can mean something. A gesture, a phrase, a pause at the right moment. All of it can carry meaning. And because of that, control doesn't require constant visibility. It operates quietly, efficiently, almost invisibly. Which raises another question. If communication is this advanced, how far does it actually reach? For some prison gangs, the walls are not limits. They are just another layer of operation. Connections on the outside continue. Associates remain active. And in some cases, instructions flow in both directions. A conversation that sounds simple may not be simple at all, because what's being said and what's being meant are often two different things. Information moves, and with it influence, which means decisions made inside a prison can affect situations far beyond it. That level of reach is what makes these systems so difficult to break, because they are not isolated, they are connected, and connections are harder to control. Inside prison, information is power, but sharing it can be dangerous. There are individuals who choose to cooperate with authorities, sometimes for protection, sometimes for reduced sentences, sometimes for reasons no one else fully understands. But once that line is crossed, there is no returning to normal. Trust disappears, and suspicion replaces it, because inside prison, being labeled as someone who talks changes everything, and the consequences are not always immediate. Sometimes they take time, which makes them even more unpredictable. To disrupt gang activity, prisons often rely on isolation. Special units designed to separate key individuals from the general population. Limited interaction, restricted movement, constant monitoring. The idea is simple. Remove the leadership, and the structure weakens. But in reality, it's not always that straightforward. Even in isolation, communication finds a way. And influence doesn't always require physical presence. Because once a system is established, it can continue operating, even under pressure, which leads to a difficult realization. Control isn't just about proximity. It's about structure. And structure is harder to dismantle. As time passes, new individuals enter the system. Younger, less experienced, often unprepared. But the environment they enter is already defined. They learn quickly, because they have to. The rules, the expectations, the consequences, and, in many cases, they are absorbed into existing systems. The cycle continues, not because it's forced, but because it's already there. And once it's there, it becomes part of the environment itself. There have been efforts to reduce gang influence. Programs, interventions, changes in management. Some have worked to a degree. Others have struggled. Because the issue is not just the gangs themselves. It's the conditions that allow them to exist. Overcrowding, limited resources, long sentences. All of these factors contribute. And as long as those conditions remain, the need for structure, for protection, for identity, will continue. Behind every locked door, there is a system operating. Not always visible, not always understood, but always present. Prison gangs are not just groups of individuals. They are networks, built over time, maintained through discipline, and reinforced by environment. For those inside, understanding that system isn't optional. It's survival. Because in a place where control is constantly contested, the most dangerous thing is not knowing who really holds it. And by the time that realization comes, it's often already too late.